Now, over to you, Ian Gough. Ian, you and I speak a lot about energy because we know that while transport is the single biggest contributor to our carbon footprint as a borough, domestic energy use and business energy use combined is probably the second largest contributor. So how does energy use relate to the climate crisis?
Yeah, okay. So in the UK, approximately 50%, but sometimes as much as 70% of our energy still, unfortunately, comes from burning fossil fuels. Gas is the biggest culprit in this respect for home heating, but unfortunately in the UK we still have coal and oil-fired power stations for electricity generation. Renewables are being built all the time, the capacity is still getting there though, and I'll be honest, with the type and variety of renewable energy generation, sometimes it's quite intermittent. So if the wind doesn't blow, wind turbines don't work. If it's not a nice, bright, sunny day, we're not going to get an awful amount of energy generation from our solar panels. Nuclear backs this up, and nuclear is often seen as a clean fuel. I'd argue it's not, but unfortunately in the UK we still do have a reliance upon coal and gas particularly. When we turn the lights on or plug our equipment in, therefore fossil fuels are being burnt, and emissions, carbon emissions, the biggest culprit is resultant. We're causing carbon emissions, and carbon emissions is proven leads to climate change. This is for straight energy use, lighting, heating, equipment. Think of all the electrical appliances in your homes, you know, TVs, computers, toasters, kettles, washing machines. I could go on and on. Hair dryers, don't have the need for one of those anymore, but there you go. Ovens, dishwashers, you name it, a lot of them involve energy. And that's just stuff that use electricity. I want you to think for a minute about all of the things that we touch on our daily lives that involve energy, what we call embedded energy. I had this conversation last month with a small school child, and I asked him, what time did he wake up in the morning? 6:30 a.m. was the answer. And I said, what was he sleeping on? A bed. And I said, good, where was that bed made? And we eventually got to, it was made in a factory, and that factory used energy to make that bed. And in using that energy, they released carbon emissions. And then went on and said, what did he do next? Well, he got changed into his school uniform. Great stuff. Where was your school uniform made? In a factory, using energy, therefore carbon emissions. So going back to your initial question, it's quite simple really, that energy leads to emissions directly and indirectly, carbon emissions being the biggest problem, and this in turn is proven that it equals to climate change.
Thank you for that, Ian. Now, clearly, the energy companies have a lot of work to do in order to green up their energy supply. But what can we do, and what are the energy team doing locally to reduce CO2 emissions?
Okay, yeah, so from a Wokingham Borough Council perspective, firstly and importantly, we know through monitoring, constant monitoring, what our energy usage is. That's really important, and we know that down literally to the last kilowatt hour energy usage. Once you know what your energy usage is on a site-by-site basis, you can then look at targets to reduce energy. Our standard approach for each property is to reduce by the biggest energy usage or equipment first. But for us at Wokingham Borough Council, we also have to be mindful of payback against this too. Typically, our energy reduction projects pay back within a 7-year period on our initial investment. But importantly, they save energy from day one and therefore carbon from day one. Simply by reducing energy usage, you're reducing carbon emissions. At Wokingham Borough Council, we're rolling out a big programme of actively working on all of our sites, including schools, to reduce energy usage through a whole raft of measures. For instance, a lot of schools out there will have recently seen low energy lighting going in, boiler replacement, insulation placement, control issues, something that will lead to better control of heating or better control of energy generation. And then going forward, we're looking at generating our own energy where possible through renewable energy generating technologies. The borough have a massive ambition in this respect, and solar farms right now are being looked at considerably. By generating energy in this way, we're becoming more sustainable and generating energy with minimal knock-on carbon emissions. In the short term, just to get us there, we're still looking at procuring green energy tariffs to ensure we're being seen as responsible as possible. And we've also commenced a massive range of social energy reduction programs to help residents to be greener. So, for instance, energy reduction issues in their own homes. Again, going back to that reducing energy, however we can, and to make their homes as energy efficient and as green as possible.
Thank you, Ian. So, once our viewers have gone home and understand what their energy usage is as a household, what can they do along with their parents and their neighbours and their friends and families to reduce that carbon footprint coming from their domestic energy use?
Okay, so we've already seen a few mechanisms of how we can lead students to do this better for themselves. I think Diana and Ian mentioned a fair few, and I'll go on to mention a few more. Purely from an energy perspective, there is a lot that people can do. From an energy-centric perspective, we need to think about how we use energy. I've seen time and time again, I'll walk into a school, for instance, or a home even, and we'll see beautiful natural light coming through the window, and yet every last light bulb turned on. And it's quite simple, really. You just need to be conscious and make a conscious effort to understand that relationship between energy usage and carbon emissions. People often say, they don't think about energy until the lights go off, but I want people to start thinking about energy more in terms of carbon emissions. So turn the lights off if not required in school, wear jumpers in the winter, think about the equipment usage and not only what you need, turn off electrical equipment that's not needed. Certainly within the school environment, try not to open windows if you're feeling too hot in the classroom in winter. The boiler systems will self-correct. It's one of the biggest things I see as well, where the windows are cracked open because the kids felt warm first thing in the morning, and because of that, all of the heat gets lost out the window. But the boiler then constantly runs in the background to replace the heat that's being lost. We're literally heating the atmosphere up. Boiler systems will self-correct. So if you leave those windows shut, take a jumper off if you feel particularly warm, boiler system will get there. And then, not wanting to tread on any toes, but a lot of the other experts in the room will be able to put their perspective across, but we can delete old emails, something as simple as that. Collectively, this is massive. Data storage equates to energy usage, which equates to carbon emissions. And we've mentioned, Iram, I think, mentioned old clothing. A lot of people are living a disposable life in terms of sort of fast fashion. I've got a belt that I wear, and that belt happens to be 18 years old. I'm quite proud of that. We won't talk about my undergarments, but there we go. And stop consumerism. Buy what you need and use it wisely. I think David Attenborough recently stated that we only slowed down a bit and bought just what we need and thought about what we need, we could cut carbon emissions by an estimated 40%. That's significant. Consider eating vegetarian. As a 47-year-old convert to vegetarianism, I found it a bit tough, I don't mind admitting, but I'm now fully converted, and it's good. And there is a reason that tortoises live as long as they do. Make homes as energy efficient as is possible. We've mentioned a lot of things in relation to that today. There's a wide array of information available out there to residents and students, and WBC will shortly be launching a few schemes to help in this regard. Buy a green energy tariff. You do have to be a little careful with this, so choose wisely. Offset carbon emissions, and no doubt Duncan will go on to mention this, plant trees, lots of them.